This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by fish. We use them to torture worms, we use them to brighten up otherwise dull cuboids of water-filled glass, but ever since the ancient Sumerians invented fish in 1817, we don't know what they're for. Well, due to groundbreaking technological advances, it's been discovered that fish are actually edible. We here at Cooking with Grief are proud to be at the forefront of this latest innovation, and as such, our listeners can enjoy a new and exciting offer. If you use the code GRIEF, that's GRIEF, at the checkout when you visit Bob and Linda's Fishmongers in Stourbridge, you'll get 10% off any cod or haddock fillets. So go ahead and place an order when you use the code GRIEF. Fish, it's like pork, but with fewer legs. And on with the show. Hello, and welcome to episode 41 of Cooking with Grief, the comedy podcast that puts the huh into her amazing facts, the what into what an interesting topic, and the shut the fuck up into shut the fuck up. I'm Chris, human equivalent of a dead owl in a wheelie bin, and as ever, I'm joined on this chapter of certified silliness by the podcast world's ray of sunshine, Chris.
Hi there.
How are you?
Honestly, I was quite stunned by this introduction. Down near 90 seconds without saying a word, was you? You know, like how people, they like to skip adverts and stuff, but we've managed to put an advert in that will not make us any money unless the fish have deeper pockets than I anticipated.
I think that's what the gills are for. I'm no zoologist. I think that's where they keep pennies.
That makes sense then. But yeah, well, reeling. Excuse the pun.
No, don't excuse the pun. Embrace the pun. Nestle it close to your fishy bosom.
Okay.
Good. Great small talk as ever. Here's how the podcast works. 2 Chris's, 2 topics each, 1 lifelong friendship kept afloat by a commercial requirement to spaff an episode of this into your ears fortnightly. History, science, or art. No matter what, we'll find a way to misinterpret the facts. So Chris, what is your first topic?
Obviously, we're in the midst of the coronavirus right now, but there's actually another far more whimsical plague happening in China at the moment. Locusts. As in, the old angry grasshoppers.
So you say whimsical, I say biblical.
Why not both?
Not a lot of whimsy in the Old Testament.
No, but it would have been if they followed China's sort of solution. Because the headline, and this is a BBC News article, China may send duck army to battle Pakistan's locust swarms.
Sure.
And, basically, China has an army of 100,000 ducks, and they're going to release them all.
Define army.
Ducks. Just copious amounts of ducks.
Do they have ranks?
I can only assume.
Okay, good.
Presumably they're all led by a commodore. But yeah, apparently a duck can eat 200 locusts a day. So they're going to, release them, and then I don't know what they're going to release to then catch all the duck. I mean, I don't know if the ducks have do you just release them and hope they go the way you hope? Because you release 100,000 ducks and they'll just fly away and shit everywhere. Got a bigger disaster than you had before.
I mean, as long as you can sort of, maybe scoop them up and take them back to Beijing, they'll, slow roast them into a delicacy.
Well, that's another reason why not to use chickens. Apparently ducks stay in groups, so they're easier to manage than chickens. So, they are much more like an army. They parade and stuff.
Good on the land and the water, so that,
amphibious, they're basically marines. Land, water, and air. They can take control of all 3, battle spaces.
Are there, sort of desert camo ducks?
One of the drawbacks is that professor from the Chinese Agricultural University has questioned is the fact that they're going to be sent to the desert, and ducks, as you say, mostly... They mostly like water. And
locusts very dry.
Exactly.
They'll be parched afterwards.
Like
salty and dry. It's quackers.
I hope they can come up with an equally whimsical solution for the whole coronavirus thing, rather than, the whole welding people into their apartments. Release ducks into apartments.
Oh, so you think ducks is the only whimsical solution?
It's what I'm stuck on at the moment.
What if the ducks turn out to be... Let's follow the thought process through. Okay, so you get rid of the locusts, the ducks start rampaging through the town. Yeah. What do you send in to take out a duck army?
Eagles.
Diminishing numbers. You can't get eagles are going to be the elite guys, the sort of, the SWAT team of
I don't know
trained killers.
I don't know what eats ducks. I mean, like cats. No, I feel like they're too big for a cat to eat.
Maybe a big cat then.
What, lions? I think we just swap one problem for another. There's just a rampaging army of lions.
Okay, then what takes out lions?
White men.
Okay. then what takes out white men? Diabetes.
Boom.
What takes out diabetes? Diet management.
Locusts.
Yeah, as long as we keep it cyclical.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
I take it it's just the fact that the locusts are eating all the crops. That's the downside.
And presumably whatever they're growing, ducks aren't going to eat. They just want the locusts, so you just release the ducks. I say chickens will also work, but as discussed, harder to handle. Which I never thought would be the case. You'd think like chickens would be fairly easy, but apparently not.
I mean, in large numbers they do get aggressive, I guess.
It's like Napoleon and his rabbits again.
What a way to go. Were the locusts unleashed maliciously as a mistake, or are they just bred out of proportions?
It doesn't say. I assume they just locust thing as locusts do. Or somebody pissed off the God of the Old Testament and won't let Moses go again.
I mean, he's knock around in the wrong part of the world.
You came to the wrong neighbourhood, Moses.
Will you stop quoting directly from the Bible?
Once again, we have mined our trusty ore of Chinese science. And I think, as I said before, it's now exhausted. So over to you for your first topic.
Okay, so from one topic about animals to a second, you lucky animal lovers. You. Chris, if you could talk to any animal, like any species rather than one specific one, what animal would you think you'd like to have a conversation with?
An eagle, like in Assassin's Creed. Send it up and it could tell me like what the traffic's like down the road.
It always comes to fucking traffic with you. That's why we talked about inventions before, and you wanted like a periscope that could see where traffic was.
Yeah, I'm very mundane.
Yeah.
Like, I don't dream big.
Yeah.
I dream very small.
Yeah. A worm is no use to you in figuring out the traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what would you speak to?
I know geese because they're always laughing and I want to know what they're laughing about. They must have some great jokes. Well, if you could talk to bees, what did you think you'd talk about with them?
Oh, I bet they're really, like, you know those people who, like, have one hobby and they're obsessed with it and, like, it's interesting at first, but then, like, every single conversation turns back on the same topic. I reckon they'd be like that about honey.
Yeah.
Literally every conversation they'd find a way to steer it back to honey. You'd be like, I don't care anymore. Like, yeah. I get it. I'm glad you're into honey, but it's just too much.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, he passed away, but he had a good innings, and they'll be like, yeah, I know. You know what always gets me through hard times? Is it fucking honey? Yeah, it's honey. Yeah, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Yeah. Well,
yeah.
There is a European traditional custom that was at its zenith in the 17th century called the telling of the bees, in which bees, which were much more commonly kept in gardens, they would be told of important events in their keepers' households, births, marriages, departures and returns of people coming and going. And if the custom was omitted or forgotten, then a penalty the sort of superstition was that the bees would either leave, they'd stop producing honey, or they'd start to die out. If you want honey in your tea, you've got to spill it. And it's sort of a weirdly broad custom across all of Europe, but they're all slightly different country to country, but the sort of unifying fact is people were talking to bees about what's been going on. I mean, not just like, how's the weather? Raining. Oh, okay. How does that affect you as a bee? Makes it harder. Oh, okay. But, so the big events. There are funeral rites, so if someone in the family dies, then the tradition was to tell the bees, going, Grandad snuffed it.
Yeah, and then how did the bees react to this news?
Well, this sort of brought it back to honey production, going, this is going to put up the honey. It's a very one-sided conversation, but there's a tradition of hanging black for mourning around the hives, sort of black scarves, sort of cloth, that sort of thing. Records from England in the 17th century included a song or a poem that was meant to be recited to the bees. It goes, "The master's dead, but don't you go, your mistress will be a good mistress to you."
Not the best song I've ever heard.
No, I mean, admittedly, it might be my delivery. In Germany, a slightly better song went, "Little bee, our Lord is dead, leave me not in my distress." At least it fucking rhymes.
Wait, in Germany?
Yeah, obviously that's an English translation.
I was going to say, so it rhymes, but then they'll be like, what does that mean? Was ist das?
Ich weiß nicht. Oh, okay. Wie komisch.
Ich spreche nicht English.
There was another tradition of knocking on the hives before you delivered news, either good or ill.
I feel like knocking on a beehive is
dangerous. Yeah. I think maybe you knock near it, or at least like. I mean, the most annoying thing is, I don't know if your parents did this as a kid, is like instead of like knocking, they would open the door and say knock knock, which is more annoying than just coming in, you know. There's custom spread to the US later, but they opted for a generic Lucy is dead as any form of news. I don't know who Lucy was, whether she was an infamous beekeeper or beekeepress. Is there a female appellation for beekeeper? At funerals and weddings, food and drink was left out for the bees.
Was it nectar?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, in Scotland, they left a slice of wedding cake out for the bees.
It's very nice.
Yeah, it's polite. Probably take a bit back.
I
mean, if you use honey in the cake, is that an affront? Do they appreciate it? You know, oh, thanks for including us in the thing. Or they're like, that's so many of our lives' work fed back to us. It's sort of bee cannibalism. In Germany, newly married couples were meant to introduce themselves to the bees to ensure a successful marriage. And a failure to do it's essentially just introducing yourself to the neighbours when you move in, which is something I have never done. And in France, for weddings, they decorated the hives with scarlet cloth. And I don't know whether red sort of angers bees as much as it does bulls. But then again, bulls don't produce honey, so what do I know?
Yeah, no. Do not try and, well, I was going to say milk a bull, but you don't milk bees either. Well, don't milk a bull. Cause
you can, they just won't be milk.
Don't keep a bull? I don't know. What do you do? How do you get honey? Sort of just take it, don't you?
What, from a bull?
No, from a bee.
Oh. You sort of smoke them out so they get all placid and then just go in and rob the house, basically. It's essentially the equivalent of, you know, if someone breaks in and takes the copper wiring out your walls. It's essentially that. You're just stripping the sort of insulation from the house, aren't you? What the fuck have you done? That's so much plasterboard. I just had the walls done. It's like, oh, sorry, I want to put it on my bread. But yeah, that was the telling of the bees. I don't know what the modern equivalent would be. Sort of saying it to your smart device in your home.
I was going to say, hello Alexa. We've probably just woken up heavy listeners. Smart, Alexa, haven't we?
Alexa, Lucy is dead.
Alexa, subscribe to Cooking with Grief. Alexa, give money to Cooking with Grief's Patreon. $1 million.
Alexa, what's Chris's next topic?
Okay, well, for my second and final topic, I want to talk about a badass. Because, you know, here at Cooking with Grief, we do enjoy tales of...
Badassery.
Bloody tales of, badassery and people who are well-arch shooting stuff. And so I'm going to talk about a man called Bass Reeves, or he may be called Bass Reeves.
I prefer bass.
I prefer bass, but I do think it's Bass. And he was a black man from Arkansas in the 1800s, which I don't know how much American history you know, but that was a bad time to be a black man in Arkansas.
Admittedly, at that time, was there any place in America that it was a good place to be a black man?
Good's a strong word, but there were certainly...
better places.
Better.
Yeah.
Less worse.
Yeah.
So he was born in 1838 and he was a slave, but he eventually would grow up to become the first black US deputy marshal in the West. Specifically the west of the Mississippi River. So that implies there were ones before then in the East, but the Wild West is more interesting in it. And then they moved to Texas. So now he's gone out west. And the Civil War broke out in 1860 whatever.
Attention to detail.
Broad strokes when it comes to... I don't know American history enough. I know it ended in 1865. Civil War broke out, and his owner joined the Confederate Army, and he took Bass with him. Obviously, as you can imagine, like, he's a black man basically being forced to fight to keep himself a slave. I mean, it's not exactly a great setup, is it? Like, hey, come with me. What are we fighting for? Well, basically the opposite of what would benefit you. Well, he did the sensible thing. He had enough, and he ran away, which is probably the only logical thing you could do when you're all the way down there, and went into Oklahoma, into the Indian Territory, and took refuge with Native Americans. So apparently the Seminole, Cherokee, and the Creek. And whilst he was there, he also learned how to speak their languages, learned how to track and stuff, and just basically lived amongst them for a few years. Apparently he claimed to be only fair with a rifle, but was so good he was barred from competitive turkey shooting because he was just too good. It wasn't fun for everyone else.
He can't even catch a break in the lucrative turkey shooting competitions.
What I'm saying is he's in his early 20s, and so far he's already ran away from the Confederate Army, lived amongst the Native Americans, and become so good at shooting that nobody enjoys it with him because he's just too damn good. Obviously, after the war, all the slaves became freed. Well, I mean, he was sort of free anyway, just on the basis that he'd ran away, but now he couldn't legally be hunted down neither. So he bought some land, became a farmer, got married, did all that. Basically like the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption. But then the government comes along, and they're trying to clean up the place, because obviously with the wilderness being as it is in America, lots of space. Again, very Red Dead Redemption-esque. Lots of gangs and ne'er-do-wells and stuff. And this guy, Bass, had this reputation for being, a tracker who could speak with Native Americans, and he'd learn how to track, and he learned how to live in the wild and all that. So they deputized him and made him recruited him as a deputy in the US Marshals. And then he was basically given bounties and stuff. Again, very Red Dead Redemption-esque. But, he's a black man going around and basically having to go around and arrest mostly white people and stuff. Which I'm sure, as you can imagine, probably, what do you call it?
Didn't go down too well.
No, yeah, exactly. It's tension. But apparently he knew the importance of looking good, so he rode a large white horse, wore a very large hat, but then would sometimes disguise himself as well. But yeah, he was apparently he couldn't read, so he'd be given because you got back in them days, you'd be given a dead or alive bounty. You had to prove that so it wasn't just murder. You had to show the warrant and stuff like that, because he was an officer of the law, but he couldn't read. So what he did was he just memorised which ones were which, and then he'd just recite it to them instead, because you have to read off the charges and stuff like that. But he'd just have to memorise them. So he'd go out and he'd have 5 or 6, or whatever that he was doing at the time. And then he'd get them, and then he'd just memorise which ones were which. And then apparently he was always able to pull out the right warrant, even though he couldn't actually read it. He just sort of knew it. Just memorised which one related to which.
Because you don't want to accuse someone... a sheep rustler of being a serial murderer.
Yeah, exactly. So once he was looking for some outlaws, they thought they were hiding at one of their mum's house. Obviously, they were hiding. So to lure them out, he disguised himself as a beggar, took his shoes off and all that, and he just sort of shuffled his way up to the door. And he told the woman who answered that his feet were aching because he'd been pursued by a posse who'd put 3 bullet holes in his hat. She invited him, began to tell him of her 2 young outlaw sons, suggesting the 3 of them should join forces. So basically, the mum snitched.
They got a confession, yeah.
Then, she waited, and he sort of said, yeah, no, that's a good idea. Waited there, and then when she introduced, she got them out of hiding, introduced them to him, and waited for them to fall asleep, and then he arrested them. I mean, it's just the fact that he's just yep, I'll just wait for you to fall asleep, then the rest. Some people would be and then ended in a massive shootout. Nah, he just waited for them to sort of drift off, and then it was really easy to arrest them. It's a lot easier to arrest people when they literally can't put any resistance to having a nap. Well, yeah, that was it, basically. He did that until he also shot quite a lot of people. Yeah, eventually he got old and retired and then eventually died.
Long life?
Long life. Died in 1910. So, born 1838, 1910. So, that's 72. Not bad at all, is it? His last job before he died was he joined the Oklahoma Police Department, or in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And during the 2 years that he served in this capacity, there were reportedly no crimes on his beat. Which, I mean, I don't know if that's just like him being really good at it, or if look at the draw. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know, the policemen are sort of reactive, aren't they?
Yeah.
When crimes happened, the police catches them. If it's just like, oh, nothing happened, there's a robbery going on right there. Didn't see it.
My back was turned.
So here we go. Apparently he captured 3,000 outlaws and killed at least 14.
It's a pretty healthy ratio.
It's not bad, is it? And he had a badass mustache, as, you know, sort of standard.
You should have mentioned that earlier. Been picturing it all wrong.
It's weird, because we don't really have, obviously we didn't have a Wild West.
Yeah, we got Cornwall.
No, that's true. I still maintain that the southwest England is the dirty south of England. You know, the dirty south equivalent in England is just southwest.
Yeah.
You know, like West Country.
Odd accents.
Pickup trucks.
You know, their cider is, sort of closest we get to moonshine.
This all happened because, you know, Indian territory and, you know, all these, vast miles and miles and miles of just untamed wilderness. Whereas even back in, medieval times in England, it was you rode for more than, a day. You're in, the next town or city.
Yeah.
There was no, there was no wilderness, you know. There's never really been much wilderness. It's just too small.
I've got a theory that's why we never produce. You know, Bruce Springsteen, sings famous about these, getting out of these dusty old towns and just hitting the highway and just driving for miles and miles. Or, you know, there's something iconic about Route 66, and we can't have that kind of sort of grand open vista optimism because, you know, you leave and you get in your car and hit the open road, and 40 minutes later you're in Leeds. And you're like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, great! I can't write a rock opera about Leeds.
Oh, yeah, no, the closest road to that I felt it's going over the Pennines from say you're going Manchester to Sheffield.
Yeah,
go Snake Pass, which for anybody who's not familiar is the coolest road name in Britain. But also not as cool as the name suggests.
Yeah.
We have a road called Snake Pass. That is pretty cool, but yeah.
But it's more like Worm Alley.
Yeah, but even then, there was when you go right at the top of the Pennines and stuff over the moors, there is wilderness. You know, and if you look around 360, you know, there's no, apart from the road that you're on, there's no sign of human habitation or whatever for about 5 minutes. And then and then either direction you're just back in a town.
It's not exactly the sort of grand American odyssey that, you know, you can aspire to.
And with that note, over to you for your final topic.
Okay, so for my final topic, we've covered, we touched briefly on the sort of real global pandemic. You talked about the whimsical pandemic of locusts, and I'll move from your story of one hero to another hero with a story of a fake epidemic.
Surprisingly coherent, this episode.
I know. For the record, we don't talk about what topics we're going to discuss beforehand, but we've found a coherent theme throughout all of them. An uncharacteristic one, I should point out. Don't expect this level of slick professionalism. This is the story of Eugene Lazowski, a Polish doctor who saved thousands of people during the Holocaust by creating a fake epidemic. In the town of Razwadał in Poland, he discovered, along with someone he went to medical school with, he discovered a typhoid vaccine that would make people test positive for the disease without actually contracting it. Under Nazi occupation, when a Polish town was found to be infected with typhus, the Nazis would quarantine the entire area. So Lazowski injected thousands of people with the vaccine and sent the blood samples off to report epidemic. Polish people who were found to be helping or hiding Jewish people were risking the death penalty, so he was putting his life on the line to do this. But for a time it worked, and people stayed away from the town of Roswitha. In order to not arouse suspicion, he vaccinated Jewish people and non-Jewish people, so that, I think the theory was that if it was only the Jews contracting this, the Nazis would just come in and kill them all. But by 1943, the Gestapo grew a bit suspicious of the fact that the epidemic seemed to be continuing, but no one was dying of the disease.
And this is one thing the Gestapo don't like, it's people not dying.
So they sent a medical team to Razvadov. Lazowski threw them a big welcome feast, this medical team, got them wasted on vodka, while some of his staff were preparing the oldest and sickest looking patients in this sort of really run down shack to make it look as disease stricken as possible. He then brought the medical team over and invited them to examine them, but told them, and I quote, this is what he told them, to be careful because the Polish are dirty and full of lice, which transfers typhus. So this medical team did tests really quickly, took blood samples, but weren't exactly thorough with their medical appraisals. But the tests all came back positive because of this vaccination, and they declared the epidemic was still going on, and they never came back. And the people of Razvadov were spared from the horrors of the Nazi occupation.
So what's the plan? Basically just he infects people, and then the Nazis basically were just like, oh fuck, I'm not getting that. Left the town alone.
Yeah, I mean...
the plan didn't go any further than... He wasn't then there was no plan to sort of use this to escape or anything. It was just, we'll stay here. We'll stay where we are, but the Nazis will have to fuck off.
I think the Nazis probably thought, oh, well, we don't have to waste too much resources killing them because the typhus will do it for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that's a dark thought for a comedy podcast. But because of his actions, it is estimated that 8,000 people who would otherwise have been taken to concentration camps or just killed were spared because this town in Poland was essentially left alone.
Well, that's good then.
Yes, that is the takeaway. Oh, that's good.
It's good. Well, no, just because obviously it was obviously you don't have much to lose at this point, but it's a high risk maneuver because with the Nazis being the bastards that they were. Also, side note, isn't it weird that in 2020 we seem to be having a debate on, I know because I'm the Twitter person and you see this online, but the whole, is it bad to be a Nazi seems to be a debate that's ongoing, and it's we've answered that pretty unequivocally about 70 years ago. Yes, it's very bad to be a Nazi.
Yeah, it should be a universally and completely uncontroversial thing to say that.
But anyway,
yeah.
Somehow the Free Speech Brigade are now saying, oh, you can't. It's bad to punch Nazis. It's it's really not.
Yeah, they're Nazis.
They're Nazis, yeah. But anyway, high risk maneuver because obviously if it wouldn't have been out of the realms of possibility. The Nazis just they've got an infectious disease, kill them all now.
Or even discover that he was trying to protect them, and
yeah, and then need to get hauled away.
The story ends well. Dr. Lazowski emigrated to the US in 1976, became a professor at the University of Chicago, and died in Oregon in 2006, having lived a long life. Interestingly, he never told anyone about this. It was only discovered in 2002 that he'd done this.
Never bragged about it or anything?
Nope, just quietly just did what he thought was right to protect people, but got the credit for it before he died a few years later.
Did he get one of those, was it Friends of Israel or whatever thing? Schindler. I think it's Friends of Israel. You know what I mean? There's that highest honour that Israel sort of bestows upon people who aren't Israeli or aren't Jewish.
Yeah, I don't know actually. I'll have to look that up, and if I find that he did, maybe we could mention it on the Twitter.
Indeed. Yeah, no, that's a very heroic tale.
Yeah.
Had a very heroic podcast. No, this episode, not us.
Oh, I see. I thought, in no way is just what we do compare.
I know I'm like full of hubris, but I don't have enough hubris to compare myself to like an ex-slave who becomes a marshal or a guy who saved 8,000 people from the Nazis.
Okay.
Even for me, that's a bit much.
Okay, even for you.
We are fucking heroes, though.
Saving the world from a lack of content every 2 weeks for between 30 and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Heroes.
Yeah. Heroes.
So that brings us to the end of yet another instalment of Cooking with Grief. This has been episode 41, a surprisingly narratively coherent episode, because normally we just jump around like a rabbit on fire, but which probably would have harmed Napoleon in some way. But no, instead we've linked seamlessly from epidemic to epidemic, from hero to hero. So all it leaves us to say is thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us again next time. I've been Chris.
And I've also been Chris, but not the same Chris. A different Chris.
Helpful clarification. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you are currently listening to this. It helps other people find the podcast and bumps us up the charts a bit to make it easier for people to find us. You can follow us on Twitter for follow-up facts about the previous episodes, rants about the state of the world, general observations, a ranking of our dad jokes, our favourite celebrities, and at least 6 other things. You can email us if you've got longer form feedback at cookingwithgrief@gmail.com. Oh, sorry, the Twitter was at cookingwithgrief with no G on cooking. Probably should have mentioned that. Thank you to Big Heads Media for hosting us and for gently cradling us to sleep as our podcast parents. After I've finished waffling, you'll be hearing an ad for one of our fellow Big Heads Media podcasts. So we hope you, if you like the sound of that, maybe check them out. I think that's everything, isn't it?
Yeah, that seems to be a succinct and coherent outro.
What's happened to us? We used to... Our trademark was a sloppy outro.
Ugh.
Sorry, that's the worst combination of words I've ever seen.
Oh, it only could have been worse if you described it as moist somehow.
A moist sloppy outro. Viscous and
End it.
gelatinous. It leaves a taste in your mouth like ass. Ooh.
Yeah. Alright, bye.
Bye. I would say we love you, but I think that that outro was a hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
We love you.
Please tell your friends.
Oh yeah, that was the thing. Recommend us to someone who you might. I mean, I know that's coming off the back of that sort of less than slick outro. So just be careful who you recommend it to. Lot to think about. Bye.
Hi, I'm Brad.
This is Rob.
And I'm Dustin.
You guys, I messed up.
I hate him so much, Rob.
Kill yourself already. Jeez.
Oh, we can't use this one. Because you dropped the F-bomb and you told him to kill himself.
Oh, did I say something wrong?
Only on Big Heads Media.
Yes! Nailed it!
God, I hate you guys.